thanks for being here. My name is Scott Rennick. I'm the owner and the publisher of the Climbing Business Journal. You guys probably know what we do and what we're about. We've been around for 13 years. We serve the professionals and the entrepreneurs of the climbing industry. We work to empower and inspire y'all. And, our roots are back in route setting. Our founder had routesetter.com before he even started CBJ, Mountain Health, Level 5. And myself, I was a route setter 25 years ago, commercial and comp setter around the country. And so this is really core to what we are. We know that y'all are the ones that make the product. Y'all are the ones that really define the culture in so many ways. And so we're really psyched to be doing these online discussions. And I'll like to introduce Justin Foxman. We're really privileged to be working with Vortex Routesetting. They've been working to empower route setters, collecting data, talking about compensation and workplace situations for they presented at the CWA Summit like 2 years ago and have been active in that space ever since. We've been privileged to work with them over the last year on these kind of presentations and webinars. Both of them are seasoned route setters. They've both set for over a decade, and they've both opened gyms, and they've both led crews that had multiple locations, and they really bring a wealth of expertise. So we're privileged to work with them today. I'll stop talking. Justin Foxman, pass it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Scott. I think we also need to introduce the other two guests in the room, so I can take a stab. We've got Kenny Benson, USAC L4, over a decade of commercial route setting experience, most recently just promoted to the route setting director for Momentum. Like, congrats, Kenny. On the other end, we've got Morgan, also L4, head setter of the Seattle Bouldering Project here in Seattle. So I want to thank both of you for just being here. Let's start talking about how old we are and how we keep doing this.
Well, so I'm going to lay out just like some general ground rules for like this whole conversation. We're going to talk about like some problems that we face as route setters, but we all know these already. So we're going to lay them out, and then we're going to move on to like solutions, because we can sit around and complain about things for hours and hours and hours. And the next time I'm in the same city with any of y'all, I'm happy to like go and drink about it. But that's not what this space is for. So we're going to keep the conversation moving towards like ways that we can make our lives and jobs and hopefully this like industry more better. So, problems. There's a shelf life for every route setter. We can't turn a wrench forever. A lot of experienced route setters tend to just leave the industry and get real cynical. And there tend to be unrealistic expectations entering the industry and staying in there, both from route setters and from management and the community. So, Justin, I'm going to toss it over to you. Those are the problems. We already know about it. What questions are we trying to answer here?
Yeah, so I've got three, and then let's just dive into them, however it makes sense. The first on my list is, can we make route setting sustainable? The second, how do we keep experienced route setters like within the industry? And third is, when is it time to move out of the way? So let's open it up. Kenny, Morgan, you want to tackle any of those things, and let's start the conversation.
Yeah, I think it is extremely possible to do this for a long while. I'm 40. I don't foresee me leaving anytime soon. I think I can ride this out till 50, 55, the way I feel now. But to sustain it, I've definitely changed a lot in my life and how I approach things. And I think if I would have started younger, I'd probably feel even better than I do now. So I think that's the big question of like coming in, how can you be active in making sure this is sustainable in the long run?
So what would you tell your younger self? Like if you were starting out tomorrow, what would you say to like, child you?
Slow down. I don't need to try every move 1,000 times. Put on those down climbing jugs, try individual moves. If you're setting on ropes, find every single possible way to take weight off and move up the wall seamlessly. I can't tell you how many times I've done it and watched people just drag heavy ass buckets all the way up the wall. From day one, just start learning every single way you can minimize impact on your body.
I feel that like the sustainability piece of like using efficiencies and technologies, especially on rope setting. I feel like, you know, I've been setting for almost 20 years, and I remember like first learning, and there was definitely like a mentality against, it's like, oh, you need this pulley or you need this etrier. And I feel like we've come a long way as like professionals, and I think people are adopting more of this technology, and I think it's becoming more mainstream, which hopefully is just saving the future generations of route setters.
I still see a lot of people basically doing one-arm pull-ups though up a rope system, and I know Justin, you and I have had a lot of conversations kind of about how our bodies feel after, you know, bouldering versus setting on ropes. And I think I learned a lot of very efficient systems like from you early on about like how to set on a rope. And so at the end of a rope day, I actually feel pretty good, but I know that it's the opposite for a lot of people. And I assume that it's because there are those little inefficiencies in how people are using their systems, and setting themselves up like to sit for a while with a bunch of weight hanging in weird directions.
Yeah, the invention of the Bosun chair is like one of the best inventions for my route setting on ropes, for at least, you know, if you don't have access to a lift, I mean, that maybe is better, I guess. What about you, Kenny? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think along with being intentional with the gear that we're using and knowledgeable, you also should just think about like working within your comfort zone. Like I see a lot of newer setters forget that they can like go in direct somewhere. And so yeah, they're sitting on all this like expensive gear, but they're not using it, and they're still like leaning off to the side with like a giant volume in their hand. Um, Even in the lift, like if you have a boom lift, like move it to the right area. Like don't be like in all this weird ergonomic situations trying to put on heavy things. And then one thing I'm telling people more than ever now is just like train, like lift weights, like get stronger just for like life, you know, like you do have to pick up boxes, you have to move heavy things. And yeah, it's important to train for climbing, but it's also important to like think about your body as a whole and what's going to keep you like sturdy and healthy, functional throughout your whole lifespan.
I want to just jump onto the end of that, because I think that could be huge. There's so many like newer route setters, especially younger route setters that I've mentored and trained, that, you know, they'll set 3 or 4 days and then spend their whole weekend just like rampaging at the proj. And I think that, you know, I remember those days too, and I thought I was invincible. And you know, the idea that like the young person can just do it. I think just like having a conscious understanding of like what your body output is, and like affording yourself the appropriate rest, because all of us have to show up for work on Monday and perform. And so like our decision making skill processes are sort of in some ways impacted by that.
I think it's like a step further than that too, though, because you do have all of these like young bloods who can go rage and then perform, but the timeline on that changes. And so, you know, if you're able to do that when you're 20, what aren't you doing to like set yourself up for success when you're 35 or 40? Are there injuries that you're accumulating? Are you not like actually training properly to like actually lengthen that career? And I think that that's like kind of what this whole conversation is about, is like how to be mindful when you're starting your career so that you can have that long career that you're like hoping for. It's easy to tell yourself like, "Oh, it's going to be fine. I feel great today." I don't know.
A really easy way to think about it is like you're an athlete. And if you look at professional athletes, like what are they doing? They're going to like physical therapy, they're going to cross training, they're stretching, they're getting massages, like they're actually taking care of themselves. And I know some of us maybe don't have the income to afford doing all of that. But even the littlest of things stretched out over your career. I mean, I didn't start getting sports massages until maybe like last year. And maybe if I had been doing that for 11 years, I wouldn't feel the way I feel. Maybe my back wouldn't have some of the issues that it has because I would have caught things earlier and been able to like adjust my lifestyle and or like how I'm attacking the day to just prolong how good everything will feel. If you are fortunate enough to have that income or work for a company that allows you to maybe contribute to like an HSA or gives you an allowance to kind of like set up some of these things, I think actually using it is a huge like benefit. You know, we at Momentum give people for route setting, we give them basically $50 a paycheck to use on whatever they want that can help their bodies. Most of the time it's massage, but yeah, we have like 19 or 20-year-old kids that are just like not using it at all because they don't feel bad right now. And I don't think that many of us are that young in this group right now, but I think if you are fortunate to have those things, actually using them is your best friend. Don't just sit on them. Don't just like let your company not take care of you if they do contribute to an HSA or any of those things with your health insurance. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling now, but I think take advantage of what you can.
So
Yeah.
go ahead, Morgan.
Yeah, I was gonna say just that one of the biggest things that's changed in my life is like actually going to the PT instead of just like guessing what something is or like running it out or trying to create my own workouts around it. Like going to professional and immediately figuring out what it is and resolving it the right way the first time has been extremely impactful.
So one thing I totally agree with what both of you said, and I think that that's something that you either need to take the initiative to, or like, you know, hopefully if your gym provides you with some additional support there, you know, taking advantage of it. I think for us who are in management and sort of like leadership roles within the route setting department, I think there is also an onus for us to spot some of these things and just do check-ins for our people. And so one of the things that we can do is sort of just do like little assessments, check-ins, just ask people. Maybe we've got 4 people on our team and we're climbing a bunch of boulders, just like, who feels good today? Who feels tired and wrecked? And how can we like best delegate the tasks of the day to make sure that like we're being balanced, and the person who has a bunch of rest and fresh skin is maybe like a little bit willing to push harder than the person who's like bleeding from their ticks because of all the fiberglass. So I think that we can empower ourselves to kind of like help them think about that.
Well, and that kind of moves nicely into like one of the questions that you had posed at the beginning, Justin, which is that like, you know, when can we step out of the way? When can like older mentors and managers, head route setters start to like move out of the way and let some of the younger people take on more responsibilities for decision making and forerunning? How can we let people who are feeling a little bit fresher take some of that load in a way that isn't burdensome to them, but rather supports the whole team?
Yeah, one thing that makes me think about, I know I feel fortunate. Currently, I'm working for Edgeworks, which is a pod of gyms in Seattle, and we have designated shifts that are just for people that come in to forerun. And so like we have support that comes in to just help pull. And sometimes this is like a young 20-year-old who can do whatever they want. And sometimes it's like a route setter who's just like taking a slightly easier day, or doesn't, you know, they only come in for a small amount of time. And I think that support structure kind of lends itself to a little bit more assistance, so the burden isn't falling on just like the smaller team.
Yeah, Kenny and Morgan, do you guys have like similar setups at your gyms where people are able to like step aside if they're feeling a little bit more tired? Do you have dedicated forerunners at all?
We don't necessarily have dedicated forerunners, but we're fortunate enough that we have like enough gyms and large enough gyms to where the crews are pretty built out. Um, I can speak like Salt Lake, for example, right now has 15 route setters. So, I mean, they're dividing up and conquering our 3 or 4 gyms. But when we do have large crews, we do check-ins, like Justin was saying, and I think it's just very important as leaders to allow people to express some of their like injuries, express some of their concerns with the week or like how they're mentally feeling. And, you know, I, for one, maybe am not setting that much that day. But if one of our crew members is like really feeling terrible, then I can like step up and do more. Or I can ask other crew members to like give a little bit more assistance if they're feeling well. And I think it not only like builds trust within the crew that like everyone's kind of got your back, it also just allows you to, I don't know, be real. And there's this expectation that we're like gods that can climb every day, all day, and pull every move. And that's just like not true. No matter how strong you are, you have a bad day and you need help. So just allowing people the space to just be honest with what's going on with them is really, really beneficial.
Yeah, we're very similar to Kenny. Is we don't have forerunners, but our team is very open about how they're feeling, about what's going on. And again, yeah, we all step up when we feel like we need to, and be helpful with the team as much as possible. I think one of the other things we do is we know each other's strengths pretty well. And so if there's a particular move, we'll go grab that person to help out and bring them in and do what they're good at, and use our strengths in the best way possible.
So I want to take a little bit of a pivot away from the sustainability wellness thing and sort of jump into sort of a next topic. I feel like education is also an area that we could spend some time talking about, because as the experience and the age kind of grows on us, route setters tend to end in, or move into sort of mentorship roles, whether that be sort of the senior route setter or whether that be sort of management. Education and training is sort of like a crucial component to sustaining a team, but also growing an organization. So I'm curious if either of the three of you kind of have any thoughts or sort of models or want to share anything about the education kind of front.
I think something that Kenny had said kind of pivoted really nicely to that, which is talking about like you don't have to be the strongest person on a team. And as we get older, like there are genetic anomalies that say super strong for forever, but a lot of us do lose strength as we get older. And so being able to like use our knowledge to kind of like grow that resource base amongst the younger route setters, and giving some of the older route setters more time to mentor, I think is really critical. And I think it does that time component is important because it's hard to be like super efficient with your route setting and it's like sling up a whole bunch of boulders if you're also teaching somebody how to do that. But using people for their knowledge base, I think will make the entire team more efficient long term and giving people the opportunity to mentor younger route setters.
Yeah, I think there's something else in there too, is part of going back to sustainability is having conversations about what's going to happen if you make a tweak. Like why is it the correct change, and like what's it going to do for the rest of the climb, and having these conversations before you even get on it. And that way you're not just blasting holds, trying it, and it's not working. Like teaching people to have those conversations and before we even get on the wall so we can save energy. And often I find is that I'll say something, someone argues it, we kind of go back and forth, and I go, oh, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, maybe you're right. And I just saved some time before I got on the wall. So just communicating and having conversations and talking about why something works the way it does, goes a long ways. And I think it helps a new setter too to start visualizing what movement looks like before you actually get on.
Yes, the critical thinking part of route setting rather than just like spraying and trying it 15 times until you figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I spend a pretty good amount of time splitting my crews up into like well thought out groups of having like different experiences, different strengths and weaknesses, different like maybe like climbing abilities as well, just to try to make it as well rounded as possible. And I'll usually pick like a leader of that group for the day. And that leader is most likely going to be like the older or more experienced setter. And that's my time for that person to, you know, give some knowledge to those that are working underneath them, but also, you know, promoting more of these discussions like Morgan is talking about. And I'll float a lot more and use my time to maybe break away someone who's having an issue with a boulder or a climb, and I'll dive into it with them and then let the others in the group go on to the next thing. And it doesn't bog down the efficiency so much, but it does allow me to like have some one-on-one time with people and really like push the envelope with like, yo, we don't need to climb. Like, I am not even warmed up. Like, I've been doing admin work. So like, let's just talk about this move and really figure it out conceptually. And then we'll bring everyone back over and we'll try it again after that. And I think it takes trust from your crew, but if you're doing it correctly, I don't know, I haven't had my crew revolt on me yet, just because I'm maybe not climbing or didn't set something in that zone and come in after the fact and help people. If you're having really open conversations and you're really like talking things out in a professional manner, hopefully it's just like building this culture of trust and collectiveness rather than just like beating our heads against the wall until someone does the move.
Well, and something that I'm thinking about too is educational opportunities kind of outside your specific team, where kind of early on in my route setting career, I started teaching women setting clinics that just pretty consistently, there was always a want for that. And as our industry continues to grow, those intro to setting clinics and then more professional opportunities like, you know, the CWA's route setting certifications, finding spaces where, you know, if you've got the experience to teach a clinic, you can start to build your reputation as a teacher and not just a commercial or a competition route setter.
I think that's really important because, you know, the country is going to continue to open gyms, right? And there needs to be newer setters and someone has to teach them. And the best way to have them be taught is by the experienced ones. And so it kind of goes hand in hand with like, as we get older and we want to step back from the boots on the ground grind, we can sort of take over into this like mentorship or educator role, whether it be clinics, whether it be like, you know, organizing for a gym. I think there's a lot of directions you could take that. So I guess, you know, we're sort of halfway through. I would love to just like give the audience an opportunity to check in, like, hey, are we, do we have any questions? Do we want to like jump in and see, also like, is this kind of the stuff you want to hear from us? Is there a different direction you were hoping this would go in? Anyone want to jump in and
I was hoping this conversation was going to make me a decade younger. Hasn't done that yet. But yeah, for me, I look at this as a problem that exists on multiple different tiers, and those tiers being like the gym owner or the upper management, the head setter or the lead setter for the session or the crew, and then individually as a setter. And each one of those tiers has different things they can do to help with the longevity overall. You know, as a gym owner, providing good gear, allowing a good schedule that allows rest days and recovery time, providing PT options or massage or chiropractic work or whatever it is. And then as a head setter, being able to communicate really well with your team, understanding what they're feeling in that given day or what their strengths are. Some of the things both Kenny and Justin and Foxman, you guys have all mentioned some of these things. And then as an individual, having that mindset that you really want to, be a professional athlete. It's part of your job to be healthy and to recover and take care of your body. I see Isaac with the Theracane there doing some work, putting in the practice that needs to happen. And so I think that the solutions for the longevity exist on all of those different levels. And we all have different level of responsibility to make that just an integral part of our industry and what's expected of route setters and what's expected of gym owners.
Yeah, really well said. Thanks, Ty. Anyone else? Marco's got a question in the chat. I'll just read it so the viewers later can hear it too. He said, what avenues exist for setters that are towards the end of their careers, and how do setters become qualified for those next steps? I think that's a great question, right? How do you become, how do you make the leap from route setter to route setting manager, or, whatever that sort of next step is, leadership role? That's a tough one. Any thoughts from the group?
Yeah.
Kenny, go ahead.
Yeah, let's go.
Wow, what a hard question. In an ideal world, you work for a gym for a little while and you get lucky and you get a great job. In a not so ideal world, you have to make the opportunity for yourself. So yes, set commercially, do comps, do the whole gambit that you feel like you should do. But outside of the route setting, in order to be a manager, you have to have really good soft skills. You have to be able to communicate, be emotionally intelligent, really prove to the company you work for or the companies that you're interviewing with that you're more than just a strong route setter. If you're one of those people that doesn't quite have those skills, it's quite easy to read a book. It's also easy to find YouTube videos and just do as much research as you can to make yourself more than just a route setter, I think, in order to move into management. If you're just trying to look for USAC things and events and clinics and stuff like that, I mean, it costs a lot more money to go that route. And for myself, I found a company that I really believed in, and I just kind of stuck with it and made sure that I was growing both as a setter and as an individual, and was putting myself in the right positions to be in meetings with the right people, and never once, looked elsewhere, because to me, this was where I wanted to be in the long term. So I'm just going to make it happen, basically. I know that's probably not the answer that you want to hear, but climbing is still I don't know, it's still small enough to where in a lot of ways you do have to just find the right place and do the work and wait for the opportunity. Maybe in 5 or 10 years, you'll have hundreds of gyms to choose from and it'll be much easier. But for now, that's just how it goes. Sorry, Marco. I know you very well.
Well, I was going to speak to a little bit of a different track too, because Kenny, I think you spoke a lot to that head setter and management role. And I was going to talk a little bit more about the education and clinic teaching side. And this is still fairly new, but the Climbing Wall Association is working to get professional route setting clinics up and rolling in such a way that I don't know how familiar everybody is with their climbing wall instructor certification program, but you can become a provider and then teach climbing wall instructor classes, and just go to gyms and teach all of their people how to teach belaying. So we're working really hard to get something like that running for professional route setting, including work at height certifications and things for just boulders, for ropes as well. And so kind of looking into that program, knowing that there is a big push to provide certification provider avenues so that you could go to an area and teach people how to work on ropes, in a reasonable way? And how do we approach ladders and safe attachment of holds and volumes? As the industry grows, I think it's only going to become kind of a more watched by regulatory bodies about how we're affixing things to a wall. So I think there's a future there. I'm super biased, clearly, but that's definitely one avenue.
Yeah, I want to add to that because I think I don't know. I feel like we've been saying it's just a matter of time for OSHA to sort of slide into the climbing industry, and I think, yeah, we shouldn't talk about it. Okay, I mean they have in some ways, but they're not in it nearly as much as they are in like the construction world and stuff like that. And I think, fortunately, like Fox and I are both on some of the committees that are helping the CWA build some of these things, and so we have a little bit more visibility on that. But like, I think the CWA is trying to get ahead of it, and I do see a future where a lot of gyms are going to look at these standards. Maybe OSHA will look at these standards and like make recommendations. And so I think if you can nestle yourself into an opportune situation where you can actually teach it, then that sets you apart from someone else. One other thing I want to just add, just tailing on to sort of what Kenny was sharing about the like moving into management and sort of answering Marco's question, is I think there are a lot of gyms. I think there are a lot of gyms that tend to hire or promote from internal, and so sometimes like the internal track is the best way to go. And sometimes you can be an external candidate and get the job. I think being as well-rounded as possible is the most important thing that I know, at least when I'm looking for someone in a leadership position, or, our gyms have assistant head route setters and head route setters. And I consider both of those to be like the leadership team, and I treat them a little differently, but they're effectively both managers. And so the skill sets that I'm looking for are well beyond route setting. They're like professionalisms and abilities to like send emails and interact with customers and, understand budgets and, things that aren't necessarily taught on the boots on the ground grind of like just slinging grips, right? And so the world that, 10 or 15 years ago when I was learning how to route set and like was like earned a head route setting position, it means a lot. It might have been a very different role then than it is now. I know that personally what my company expects of a head route setter is like very different than like back when I was working for a previous gym chain. I was just the person who made all the tweak decisions. So yeah, I don't know.
And to that end, kind of, especially if you're looking to move into management in a bigger company, learning how to speak corporate, and if somebody asks you about KPIs in an interview, being able to like actually talk about that, where a lot of us, if we're just route setters slinging grips, that's not a part of our daily lexicon. So being able to like move into a different space and speak knowledgeably about something is going to make you more likely to be able to get hired externally, rather than just like, if somebody knows you from internally.
Yeah, I think kind of going on along with all this, just in climbing, continuing education, we're constantly trying to find like new clinic or learn something new. Like think about what's going up in upper management. The decisions that I find that setters often have a hard time with, like their GMs or their owners, they don't understand what's going on. Trying to gain those skills and have an understanding of what's going on with them, and having that conversation with them, trying to get more knowledge of where their goals are and what they're trying to achieve, and be a part of that solution with them, rather than, I think what I've seen a lot of times is like we're fighting against it. And so like whatever it is, like Kenny said, go pick up a book. I've read a ton of them too. Like I feel like my like emotional IQ is like way better than it has been in the past, and it's mostly because I picked up those books.
Yeah, personally, I can't read, so I end up watching videos. No, I'm just kidding. One of the things I think about is speaking to what you're saying, Morgan. It's just like speaking their language. Fox and I did a presentation about, I forget what it was called. It was like navigating the quagmires of. I had a really fancy title. It was just like basically it was route setters versus managers, and how this like in a lot of places there is like a lot of tension, and I think route setters come from this place of counterculture that's sort of like skate mentality, where they're like, who cares about the authority, right? Like we just want to set bangers. And I think that that mentality isn't really lending itself to that advancement. You have to sort of think through the lens of either the manager, or if you're like continuing to go up that train to the owner, it's like our department is a cog in this giant wheel that is the climbing gym. And yes, it is the product that the gym sells, but it's also like, so are programs, and so are this other thing. And so how do we integrate? How can we be successful, and how can we prop up the other parts of those wheels? Having conversations, or having like removing those blinders and to be able to see a little bit of the bigger vision will set you up for a future in that sort of managerial or leadership role.
Well, it's kind of a different track. It's the same track, but kind of the opposite end. Like we start out this conversation talking about like how can we keep more experienced setters in the industry? And a lot of what we've been talking about thus far has been like, how can you keep setting? Like, how are you going to move up that like setting management track and be more appealing to work with from the GM or from the ownership position? And something that we haven't really talked about is like moving into a management position that could be like programs manager or a GM. And I think it's easy to feel like that's kind of like bailing on route setting. But I think all of us have probably worked with GMs or ownership teams that don't understand route setting, and that conversation can be really frustrating. And we hopefully some of us have worked with GMs or owners that do understand route setting and can actually be an advocate for that department within their gym. And so, if you're kind of coming up against the end of like, I can't physically route set anymore, or I'm frustrated with it, but you want to stay in the industry, that's also a track that can make route setting better for the people that you're working with. If you can be that GM that is able to advocate for a route setting team, I think that can make a huge difference as well. And there's silence in the room. Everybody's like, no, I don't want to do it.
Well, yeah, the challenge is like when you if and when you do end up moving into a management role, and I won't lie, there are a finite number of those. Like there are definitely more route setting roles in the country or in the world than management roles, right? But there is this like affordance that you have to sort of deal with, that you probably won't be route setting as much, right? Like, Kenny, as the director, like how many days are you setting versus how many were you when you were sort of in a head route setting role, and versus how many were you when you were just like grinding on the daily, right? I'm sure that that's different. I set today, I'm going to set tomorrow, but I spend a lot more time on a laptop now than I do in front of a drill. And so like, that's partly why I can sustain it better, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I don't know, I guess the crux of the thing is like, when do you get out of the way? You should just get out of the way when you feel like you don't want to do it anymore. I think that's going to be different for everyone. And I wish we could just be like, oh, you can set till you're 48, you can set till you're 62. And that's like the perfect time to retire, like other things in this world. But depending on the situation or the circumstances, like, yeah, I mean, I could see people I know setting well into their 50s because their job is just not quite as hard as other gyms in the country. And maybe if you work for one of the bigger chains that requires you to work a lot more, maybe when you get a little older, you start looking at the smaller chains, mom and pop gyms that don't necessarily need the turnover or the density that you're currently used to putting up. And you can like find ways within the industry to scale back or up. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know when, but I'm sure at some point I will be bored or burnt out or so jaded with this industry that I'll need to find something else that like keeps me happy and motivated. And that will look different for everyone. So I don't know if I'm answering the question so well, but I think just get out when you feel it's right. Like if your mental health is fading, look deep within and be like, what can I do other than this? And if you're younger and you're like thinking, oh, wow, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have this, maybe start trying to find a backup plan or another thing that gets you excited, just so that when the day comes, you aren't strapped and totally left for dead to continue route setting, even though you don't want to or don't feel like you can anymore. I have a funny joke that someone told me, that is, route setters are just German shepherds, and German shepherds have 7 good years in them, and that's it. And so if you're one of those people that only has 7 years and you're coming up on 6, maybe start thinking a little bit about what you're going to do next. And if you're in your 7th year and you're like, oh, I can go another 7, then still start thinking about like what is next. And if that's GM or coach or whatever, then just spend some time on the weekends learning, spend some time in the evenings if you need to get yourself up to speed and just get ready for that day. Yeah. That's, hopefully it's not too somber, but
No, I don't think so. And I think that like, you know, you can take kind of that like, you know, oh, spend time figuring stuff out as like a I don't have time to do X, Y, or Z, but that can also be like a way just to pull in some extra cash too. Like, you know, I've had opportunities that have arisen because of, you know, things I volunteered for, and also like going and teaching clinics in various places just like to pull in a little bit of extra money. And then, you know, as I've gotten older, there's been a shift towards doing more of those things that, you know, when I've been setting for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, I was building up then. I already had like some experience doing those, a little bit of income from doing those things. And now I've got a little bit more of a resume to move forward with like a different path in life.
for sure,
Yeah, I
there's
think
like a ton of commercial setters that have phased out and they're still doing competitions, but they have like a normal, or you know, a normal job. It's still within the industry, you know, maybe they're selling holds or coaching or what have you, but they're able to prolong their route setting because they're not doing it on a day-to-day basis, because they found something else that they're good at that can still use their skills as a route setter. We're very creative, we're very hardworking most of the time. Like we have a really good like eye for design, and in a lot of ways we can sell too, because we're selling climbing to people as we set, and we're teaching climbing to people as we set. And so there's a lot of like unique things about this job that are very transferable, even though it doesn't really seem like it in the moment. I don't know, when I talk to people like who are on web design teams or whatever, people are like, whoa, wow, that like is pretty much what we do. And I'm like, oh shit, like I already know how everyone's working. I just do it for a climbing gym. So if I could learn some of the like background on some of these other industries, it'd be really easy to like integrate myself, because I'm already collaborating, I already understand like hierarchy and like customer service and all of these things. So yeah, sorry to cut you off, Justin.
I'm
no,
gonna
it's okay. I
interrupt
mean,
super fast too. I just want to say like apparently there's a pretty big like overlap of like landscape architecture and route setting. Like there are transferable skills.
Yeah.
yeah, no, totally. I was just gonna add, because you know your thought about the like contract sort of route setting with the event schedule, or like, you know, a lot of people hustling to try to get their USAC levels, trying to do championship level events and that kind of stuff all over the country. I think that there's definitely a lot of that, and yes, it can get expensive and it's a little bit competitive. There's also like a lot of people who are just going out to guest set, and I think that this sort of like brings us into this like world of route setting consultancy. I mean, like several of us probably do versions of that, whether it's like helping gym owners work through what hold order they should buy, or whether they can do just an opening set, right? Like assembling a team. It's like, hey, do you know a bunch of route setters, and can you just like bang out 130 boulders in a week? Like, yeah, I can do that. Let me assemble a team for you. There's a lot of things that we can do that might just like not necessarily be the commercial grind that we all think about as route setting.
So we're coming kind of close to the hour. And I want to make sure that we leave time to have like, group questions or conversations. So I'm going to toss it kind of like back to all of y'all. So, either sticking something in the chat or tossing up a hand and yeah.
Josh?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out an observation I've seen in my years of setting. I think one of the key differences for longevity that I've noticed with setters as they get older, as they come to this point in their career where they stop trying to be the quote unquote professional climber, quote unquote professional athlete that's been thrown around, and they decide that they're actually going to be a professional route setter. Like they accept that fact that they're route setting. And it's no longer about trying to crush some nails hard thing outside on Saturday after setting 4 or 5 days a week. And it's more about how am I going to take care of myself so that I can do this job that I'm getting paid to do. And so I think that's something that's worth throwing out there for people. Like when you're young, you can kind of do both. But once you hit the 30 mark, you kind of have to decide like, what's my direction here? Am I really going to chase being a quote unquote professional climber? Cool, set 2 days a week. You can still do that. But if you really love route setting and that's going to be your career, then that's about the point where you need to kind of shift your mindset a bit and be like, cool, I'm going to set 4 days a week and then gear all my other training. Like, sure, I can still climb on weekends or on vacations for fun, but it's less about just projecting your life away and more about just climbing and having a good time. But I'm also a grumpy old man, so take it for what it's worth.
No, I think that that's absolutely right. I think, when I think about trying to convince like the 20-year-old to treat themselves like a professional athlete, it's not like treat yourself as a professional climber because like we all have those dreams. But I was thinking the other day, so I came from a classical music background and we all kind of knew that if we hadn't made it as a soloist by 16, like it's not that we could never be a soloist, but there was like a different path. And I feel like the climbing industry hasn't quite had that conversation yet of like, if you're not like a world-class climber by the time you are 22, 25, maybe you will be, like maybe, but also maybe it's a different career path and it doesn't make it like better, worse, otherwise it's just different. And I think that like having more conversations about what those career paths are without like being like, oh, you're never going to make it, I think can hopefully guide people in a more productive direction.
Yeah,
I have to preface my comment there. Sorry, Morgan. I just got called out by somebody on this call about my own personal climbing. I have been able to, through kind of what Morgan was saying earlier, and Kenny himself about lifting weights and seeing PTs and actually being much more focused on training. I have been able to maintain a pretty high level, double digit bouldering as well as setting and being able to, I'm 46 now and can still climb what some would consider pretty hard. And I do think it's, I hit that point just like everybody else where it wasn't necessarily like I'm going to be a professional route setter, but it's like I learned I need to take care of my body for the long haul. And because of that, like even though you're in your mid 40s, you can still physically get stronger. And you might lose some mobility or some climbing specific things, but I have found that I am a much better climber now than I was when I was 25. Part of that is just getting smarter, learning how to climb better, being more efficient with my body. And some of that is because I'm actually focused on these other things versus just trying to hangboard for 20 minutes or, go crush my life away on the moon board. So I do think it's possible to achieve both to a certain degree. The argument could be made, could I climb harder if I wasn't doing settings still? Maybe, but that's just not where I'm at in life. That's not, I'm pretty psyched with where I'm at. So I do think, it takes all of those things that we've talked about to kind of like, but I think the important part is accepting that and being like, this is where I'm at, and this is where I want to go. Whether you want to go into management, you got to prepare for that. You can't just be like, cool, I've sat for 10 years, I'm going to be a manager. Sometimes that happens for people and they end up being terrible managers. Like I've seen it time and time again. So you have to put in the work, just like you do setting. You want to be a USAC level 4 setter, you got to put in the work. You got to, grind it out. It's the same with management. It's as simple as like finding a mentor, talk to the leaders that you like, what can I do better? Having debriefs like you do with setting comps. You have a meeting that doesn't go well with the manager, schedule a debrief a week later and be like, what could I have done better? How could I have led my team better? Like it's the same type of preparation as you're going to do for setting or leading a comp, but you just have to shift that focus and be like, okay, now it's about management. It's about taking care of my team. Sorry, that was a little bit more of a rant than I expected.
Well
Yeah,
said, dude.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
To be fair, Josh is probably the strongest person in this room. So
By far.
he's
No, that's
can say
not
all he
true at
wants.
all. These guys, I've known these guys for a million years, unfortunately. Just puts us in the age bracket.
Yeah, but I think going back to what you're saying, Josh, is like focusing on what you're doing. Like I think I felt it like anybody else. I've burnt out on this industry a little bit, and I've come back. And my focus is like, well, let's keep growing and learning, and what can I do, and make this fun, and how do I do it and stay healthy. And part of that is like, yeah, maybe I don't go climb on Sunday and I climb on Saturday. So I get that day of rest. And then I'm also very focused on what I'm doing, and I'm not just throwing myself at something or watching my skin or something silly. Yeah, I made a choice at one point that was like, I'm going to be a route setter, and I have to make some changes in my life to do those things. And that's okay. I still love it. I had a blast today setting right before we got on, and I'm like excited to come back on Thursday and do it. And I don't climb outside as much as I want for some of those reasons, and that's all right.
Part of it's the rain.
Most of it, yeah. That's actually why I moved here. It forces me to not climb.
Any other questions from the group or in chat?
I could say one thing that maybe hasn't been brought up yet, just to close out, or whatever. I don't know, we don't have to close out. But maybe some of you that are in leadership positions or what have you can also tell route setters that are working for you that like the reality of like what the max capacity that they can put out in a day is like important. If you can only climb V6 and you're a commercial route setter, you're going to have a harder day than someone who can climb, V10, because they aren't climbing at their max for nearly as much as you are. So two things can happen. One, you can get stronger, which I think should be encouraged, to find time to train, get better at climbing and all of those things. But then the second thing is to like find your lane when you are at your max and you can't go any further. Like do other things, pull ladders, help, hopefully no one's taping still, but help do other things in the set that can bring value to the crew without necessarily like having a V6 climber try V10 moves, knowing full well that there's like no reason for them to do that right now. And use it as motivation to like get stronger, but also help those that are stronger not have to like pick up the scraps at the end of the day, or go organize some holds or whatever that you need to do. But yeah, try to advocate for people to like find time to get better and stronger at climbing, because it helps a lot.
I think too, like redefining or reassessing how you forerun. I mean, this is something I learned kind of the hard way. Justin kind of mentioned this too. You don't have to do the whole problem. You don't have to try the same move 6 times, even if you make a tweak. Like the reality is, if you can't do a move in 3 tries with somewhat medium effort, then it probably needs to change. And I think what I see most in younger setters is they just want to do the problem. It becomes a session. They get psyched, and they set this cool problem. They want to send it. So they start exerting all this energy versus like, well, we know the top's good. We know the bottom's good. It's just this like middle 2 moves. Well, just focus your energy on those middle two moves, fix them, come back another day to send the thing. I think like as you get older, as I've gotten older, I've kind of learned that is much more important than when you're younger. People always ask me like, oh, have you sent every problem to Jim? I'm like, heck no. I've probably sent like 8% of the problems in the gym, really. I've done all the moves, but yeah, I don't send problems.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Any other questions or anything?
I'll just take a quick moment to plug. We have another one of these planned in December. It's also a Tuesday night, same time, December 10th. Fox or Justin, you want to tell them quick what that's going to be about and who we have lined up?
Oh yes, so badly. I very much wanted. Yeah, we're gonna talk about grades. Everybody's gonna be so excited. Yeah. Mostly that like how to talk about grades because everybody has strong feelings all of the time about how grades are. So like how to have that conversation both with, inside a route setting team and then with the community that you're within in a way that doesn't make everybody want to strangle everybody else. And then Justin, you can take the other part.
Are we gonna solve what V4 is?
Yes. 100%.
Yeah, I'm gonna sign up for that for sure. I want to know. Yeah, no, I'm pretty excited about it. We've got Flan and Tone Day tentatively booked to join us in the conversation. So yeah, if you're interested, RSVP.
We'll have that.
What V4 is.
Yeah.
V4 is the grade that comes right after V6.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is the hardest grade, I think.
It's the grade of every problem in Waco tanks.
Except for the easier V8s.
Did we do it? Are we gonna just
I
sit?
think we did it.
Okay,
We did
cool.
it.
I'm like just gonna embrace my awkward self. I don't know how to end things.
I got something real quick before you end it, Scott. Sorry. I just wanted to say thank you to you and CBJ and to Justin and Foxman and Kenny and Morgan. I think these are conversations that are really important for this industry. And I think it's awesome that Scott, you in particular, are kind of leading the charge and making these happen. And Justin and Foxman, y'all's part in all this too. So I just personally want to say thank you for that. And I think this is really cool that we're trying to kind of make this a norm for the industry. For both
for being
setting
here.
and management. I've seen your management and your retail stuff as well. Same goes for that. I think it's really good that we're trying to make this a bit more professional and have some kind of continuing education thing.
Thanks so much for your words, Josh. Some of us have been around for a minute. I wish when I was setting back in the late 90s that we had the kind of education and resources and knowledge and support that we have now. So I'm pretty personally psyched that we're doing this. Thanks so much for Josh. Thanks, Boxman, Justin, Bargan, and Kenny for joining us. Thanks, Ty and Josh, for sharing your thoughts. It was really great. Obviously, you guys have a lot to add. We'll round this up again next week or next month, December 10th. We hope you can enjoy it. And we're going to send a link out when once the recording is posted, and also a little survey. We'd love to hear what you think about this so we can make these better.